The all-new Nissan LEAF is here, and boy has it come a long way. And I don't just mean the rather rural drive we took to get out here. I mean that the most this carries with the outgoing LEAF is the fact that it's named LEAF in the first place and happens to be running off of electricity. Everything else is pretty much a wholesale change, I think pretty much all for the better, but a few of these things may be a little bit controversial. What shouldn't be controversial is the fact that I think this is one of the most exciting electric vehicles coming to market here, not just in the next few months, but possibly the next couple of years, and why if you are considering an EV, especially if you're worried about budget, this should be on your shopping list, or at least up for consideration. Normally it's good to start off with a positive, but I actually want to start this off with my biggest disappointment. And admittedly the list is short, but it has to do here with the form factor, because out is the hatchback, in is what Nissan is calling a crossover. But to me this mostly looks like a tall sedan, and it'll feel like it once we hop inside. And if we call it a crossover, it's a very coupified version, because we don't get the extra space you might get if this was still a hatchback, but you do get a very good looking vehicle. And this sort of personality is something that was missing in the second generation LEAF that we had in the first gen, but where the first gen might have been a little bit too funky for people, I think this is fun and funky, especially in this color. You do have to get one of the higher end trims to get this sea breeze, but admittedly, it might be one of the reasons I got a higher end trim, because this car screams personality. I love this color, I love this look, but if you have one of these in your driveway already, you may be surprised to find that it's gonna fit just about the same as your current LEAF, although where it gets smaller is surprising. That's gonna be both in length and the overall height. Seems strange that our crossover is now shorter than our hatchback was, but it also is going to get a little bit wider. So if you have tight space in the garage, go ahead and consider that. What might be a bit surprising is how much more this is going to weigh than the outgoing model, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have more battery. More battery in this case means more power and more range, so probably worth that trade-off. Before I get any farther, let's talk about the big changes you'll find under the hood as well as under the floor, because not only are those significant, but also the ones that you might be the most excited about. This car is going to come with two basic different configurations as far as the powertrain: a smaller battery and power output, and a larger battery and power output. The smaller battery is going to be relegated down to that base model. That's going to be the S, but we don't have information on pricing, on range, or availability. So just know that's out here, but not on the immediate horizon. Everything else is going to come standard with a 75 kilowatt hour battery. It's going to produce 214 horsepower and 261 pound-feet of torque versus the 174 and 254 we'll find on that lower battery pack. And then from there, it's all about the feature set. But all of these vehicles are going to come with front-wheel drive. So if we pop the hood here, one of, I guess, a small disappointment is that we don't find any front trunk storage, but there isn't a whole lot of front trunk space to begin with. And that is on purpose. Nissan worked hard on their packaging, so we have a very small motor unit. We also have a lot of things like the HVAC controls and components built into this space rather than having it further out into the cabin, so we get to make the most of what we get back there. And even though it is front-wheel drive only, this has benefited significantly from a lot of the shared components and the shared architecture that we find in the Nissan Ariya. And if you want all-wheel drive, the Ariya is going to be there for you. But I think most people are going to be able to get by with that front-wheel drive layout and the power available. And then at that point, you just get to decide which version of this you want. I mean, it could just be me, but I've come to love a vehicle that has a smile, and this seems like an enormous smile to me. And I also like how much we get of the body color mixed with some shiny black, mixed with some, well, what I never think should be shiny black, because if you do end up scuffing this on, say, maybe a curb, it's a lot easier to replace it and cheaper to replace it if you don't have to paint it. So I think all of this comes together very nicely. If I found it in white, though, it might look very Stormtrooper. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. I leave that one up to you. But you'll also find everything you want in a top-end trim. This is the Platinum Plus, so fully loaded, and that means things like your parking sensors, your radar. This does have the Pro Pilot Assist on board, and you'll also find a camera located just under this Nissan logo because it does have the 360 surround view. This isn't an enormous car, but if you are worried about those parking spaces, that is a great feature to have. Here in the front quarter panels, I'm getting sort of an interesting juxtaposition between new and old. These wheels do seem to be pretty reminiscent of what we found on LEAFs prior, but it's also going to be a 19-inch wheel here in the top end trim versus 18s you get in the other one, and a wider tire, 235 versus 215, but that also means that you're going to get less range with this, but maybe a more fun driving experience. Maybe something you might want to swap out if you get a lower end trim, but are looking for more fun. What's going to be new, though, is going to be here on the charging port. First of all, the location of the charging port. You'll notice we have one here on the front passenger side, and if I open this up, what's inside is nothing like what we found on any LEAF prior, because we now have an NACS port. But that NAX port, or the J3400, is going to be used only for DC charging. No AC capability built on board. If you want that, that's going to be found over there on the driver's side, where you'll still find a J1772, but no CCS combo plug. That means if you want AC, it's on the driver's side, and DC here on the passenger side. And while this is the correct location if you want to pull into a Tesla supercharger station, the fact that you have these split up honestly seems a little bit strange. But if we're talking about charging speeds, that AC will charge at 7.2 kilowatts, not especially fast, but should be plenty. What we get here on the DC side is 150 kilowatt max, but what we are going to get is going to be a 10 to 80% charge in about 35 minutes. So should be plenty to get you back on the road, and since this battery is bigger and you have more range than you ever have, that 70% gain from 10 to 80 is going to be more miles than you've ever been able to drive with the Nissan LEAF in such a short period of time. Around back, especially sort of a snapshot here of this angle, this is, I think, the most interesting design space in the entire vehicle, because there's a lot going on that draws us from a lot of different places. Let's start with the fact that I don't consider this a conventional crossover, more of a tall sedan or maybe a very coupified crossover, but it does still have a hatch. And where that hatch lifts, basically right from here and up, seems like it's drawn directly from that Nissan Z, which is a very different car with a very different purpose, but is pretty good to look at. What you might have heard on our other coverage of this is that this 2 and 3 design is based on the Japanese alphabet. 2 and 3 are Ni and San, and obviously put those together, you have Nissan. So especially over there, 2-3 is Nissan built in there. And at the top end trim, you also get these holographic light designs. And even though it's relegated to that top end trim, honestly, it makes it feel a little extra special. But let's go ahead and open this up, because this is designed for your everyday use. And for the everyday human, you need room for your items. And for myself, that means, well, my 2 carry-ons. And because this is a hatch style and it opens up nice and tall, it's gonna be really easy to get things in and out. But if I pull these out, you can see not only is it a fairly square space, but actually it is a bit small. We have about 20 cubic feet of storage capacity, though we do have sort of a split floor design. You can lift this up and there's a little bit more room underneath, but it doesn't feel like it's designed to be a full 2-stage load floor. You can also lift this up, and as you see, it doesn't go flat. So that's why there's sort of a interesting split here. So just know you can tuck things like emergency snacks or a blanket, but under here is not where you're going to be able to really maximize space. What you're going to have to do for that is fold down the seats. And while we have 20 cubic feet here, if you fold those seats down, which are 60-40, you'll get up to about 55.5 cubic feet of storage space, which is plenty as far as I'm concerned, especially for your daily use. And if you need more space, the good news here, this trim comes with roof rails as standard, so you can go ahead and put a rooftop box on. And if I was going to do so, that'd be a really fun car to bring at Cars and Coffee. You've seen the Priuses out there that are slammed with a roof box and maybe some flared fenders. I think this would be a fun one to bring, especially in this color. Now for a quick look at your daily in and out. For the people hopping up front, you do have pop-out door handles, which do function normally once they're out, and nice and sleek when they're not. Getting in and out shouldn't be too difficult. This is going to be a little bit higher up off the ground than your standard sedan, and that's a lot of the reason people look at crossovers. And once I haul myself in here, there is plenty of space, although it does feel like I'm sitting a little bit high in the vehicle, not just high up in general. But I'm 6 feet tall, I have a tall torso. It's something I've experienced in other cars before, especially EVs. Everyone's going to have a different experience. Go ahead and try it out for yourself. But with my seat set for myself, let's go hop in the back seat. You'll have to look for that door handle at least the first time, because it is going to be up here, nice and sleek, very good looking, maybe not everyone's favorite. This won't open up quite as wide, so go ahead and roll the window down so that you can see what it's like when I hop in. Now, you have to trust me on this one. I have just about an inch or two of leg room, but what I am out of is headspace. But I mentioned a taller torso earlier. I sit very tall. It's not uncommon for me to run out of headroom, especially in smaller vehicles. But actually, as far as the overall space goes, as long as you don't have a bunch of giants you fit in the back seat very often, this should be pretty good. Plus, in this model, we've got that moonroof, and that really changes the space back here. Before we dive into the steering wheel, let's talk about some of the other space here. And this is a flat floor vehicle, so let's go ahead and crawl into here, because just in front of our storage area, we have a flat load floor. A flat space, you can put whatever you want. Honestly, I think this screams, this is where your purse goes, but I can imagine there are a few more things you might put in there. If you have a small bag you carry with you, instead of having to put it in the back seat, it could go here, or instead of it going all the way into the passenger space, that would be a good landing spot. But we also do have some cup holders in this sort of lower compartment here. You can see it's holding 2 waters and lots of cables, and there's a little bit of a slot there, not a bad one for a phone, but your main slot for phone is probably going to be a little bit farther back. That's going to be this wireless charging mat that we find here. It is nice and easily accessible. You can see we've got a cleaning rag, like I said, lots of fingerprints, but it's not too hidden away where you'll forget your phone when you hop out of the car, something I know I've done more than once. There's a little bit of extra storage space back here, but this isn't an enormous interior, so I didn't expect to find a whole lot there. And if we slide a little bit further than that, you'll also find a little more power available. You have 2 USB-C ports for your charging needs, as well as if you wanted to do a wired CarPlay or Android Auto, that is available as well. Now we'll dive into the steering wheel design, and it's pretty simple. It's basically a 2-spoke design. Sort of reminds me a little bit of a TIE fighter, but maybe that's just me who happened to watch Star Wars this weekend. When it comes to your buttons, these are all going to be capacitive touch as well. So they look really nice. They're backlit and illuminated. You can see your ProPilot button up here is blue, so it stands out a little bit more than the other ones. But I'm not sure how this is going to look in a couple years when you've gone ahead and used your fingers to go ahead and press these buttons, but probably scratched it along the way because it is going to be just shiny black plastic. The one thing that was a little confusing to me was this button here, and I just haven't spent enough time in Nissans recently. If you click the one on the left, that's going to control this screen. If you click the one on the right, it's going to go ahead and let you, from the steering wheel, cycle through your main options. So that's your navigation, your home screen, those sorts of things. So just know that's what those buttons are for if you were confused like I was for just a moment. We do have paddle shifters back here, but that is to control your regenerative capacity. You do have 4 different modes outside of the E-step. Consider E-step maybe mode number 5. And because we have the top end trim, we also have the top end stereo. You can see we've got some speakers over here, obviously speakers down in the door. They're not branded in those spaces. What you'll find them branded in is the headrest. You can see we have the Bose system here, and they're up in the headrest because this is sort of the personalized audio. If you're on a phone call or you're listening to turn-by-turn directions, it can play just for the driver instead of everyone having to hear all at once. Great for phone calls. I haven't found a lot of other applications where I love it, but if you want to go ahead and, I guess, isolate yourself from what's happening in the vehicle, that's not a bad way to do it. But if you want to open things up, that's where we have this fantastic moonroof. And I'll show you now because this is the electrochromatic roof. It's the, with the press of a button, either opaque or open. And it has a really cool open animation. And I love that they did this because they didn't have to. Now you notice I pressed it once and it stopped, and located just up here is that Leaf logo sort of etched in there. And depending on where the sun's at, you can get that logo imprinted down onto like something like the seat. And it's just a fun way to leave a little bit of an Easter egg. I'll open it all the way up now and you can see it coming all the way back. And that means we are now fully open and there is plenty of sun. So honestly, I'm gonna go ahead and close that back up. That way we can get through the rest of the tour. You already saw me climb into the back, so we'll just use backpacks as examples in this case, but you can see that the same seat design from the front carries over to the rear as far as the aesthetic, including down there where you get the blue accents, not just the lighter color. You have an armrest that folds down there in the middle, 2 cup holders, and folks back here get vents, heated seats for those outboard seats, as well as USB-C charging available. So not a bad place as long as you fit pretty well. One thing worth noting though, you can see the back window there. It does seem maybe a little bit small compared to some other vehicles out there, but that's because of the shape, and it is a pretty good looking vehicle. And you also have a bunch of camera angles available, as I mentioned earlier. Now to get the Leaf out on the road, and while I haven't had a chance to do a 0 to 60 run, I have had a chance to do some pretty fun driving, and this road has been one of them because this is one of the twistiest bits of road I've seen in quite a while, and I do end up doing a lot of driving. And that's actually why I was surprised how much I enjoyed this car in this space, because handling is not what this is built for. This is to get you and your family, or just you and your dog, to and from work, office, vacations, trip to the park. It's a get-around car, but it's actually been pretty fun to drive, and my guess is it has to do with those tires. Just being a little bit wider than you get in that standard model, even though this is a little bit higher, is probably increasing that fun factor by a fair amount. And like I said, maybe not worth buying this one for those tires, but if you want to go a little bit wider, you can probably make it happen. But here's what you do get, is plenty of punchy little power. And I do say little power because we are just over 200 horsepower and the vehicle isn't quite 4,000 pounds, but we're not light either. So it's not like you're gonna be beating many, not any, but many people off the starting line. It's gonna be enough to get you to and from where you need to go, climb the hill, pass the car in front of you, all with relative ease. And because it's not 300, 400, 500 horsepower, also get you back some pretty good efficiency. I mentioned that we have 1 battery size across 3 different trims, but depending on basically the wheel and tire package, it does change those ranges quite a bit. On the top end, you're looking at about 300 miles of driving range. On the low end, 259, and then slotted right there in the middle, about 288. And so much of that has to do with the wheel size, design, and then the different tire. Obviously, the biggest drop is the one we get here. And while we've been doing a lot of climbing and freeway driving, we've averaged about 2.6 miles per kilowatt hour, which certainly isn't going to be, I don't know, blowing anyone's mind. Actually, a little bit lower than I would have anticipated, but I do think a lot of that has to do with our driving conditions. So when we get it back home, trust me, it will go through the gauntlet just like everything else. Nissan had us drive quite a ways to get out here, and along the way, there was a Nissan LEAF to go look at, the Gen 1. But that was at our first stop, not where we stopped for lunch. And honestly, it's because that one couldn't make it out here. We've driven so far about 67 miles one way, but again, we've used quite a bit of battery because it's all been climbing, it's all been freeway speeds, and that just means that poor little LEAF probably couldn't make it. A Gen 2 perhaps, but you'd run into some issues on the way back, I suspect. And this one, without issue. We're at 67%. We've been running the AC while we're filming, and everything's been on and basically draining the battery. We've got plenty to get back without worrying at all. And that's why this new LEAF is making such a stride from where it began and why it's gonna be so competitive moving forward. Because this car starts, and I guess we'll get into some pricing, at just over $31,000. Now, you'll see it under 30, but that's just MSRP, not including your destination. But with that destination, it's just over $31,000, about $500. And that means that this is basically the least expensive electric vehicle you can buy on the market, and that's not the S. That's not the base model. That's the base model for the moment, but there will still be a smaller battery and probably a few less features available, which means it should get even less expensive. And this directly competes with something like a Chevy Bolt, but the Bolt's not here. It was, and it's supposed to be, but at the moment, it's not. So everything else this competes against is a little bit more expensive and also probably in need of a refresh. So I think this is a perfect time for the LEAF to hit the market. But if you want more features and you're not worried about the absolute bottom dollar, spend a few more thousand, you'll be able to get that SV Plus at just under about $35,000. And at the very top end, what we're looking at here, about $40,875, which is not an inexpensive Nissan LEAF. And it's actually more expensive than the base level Ariya, but that's gonna be a front wheel drive Ariya at the lowest possible trim. So that's something to do a little bit of comparing against. And honestly, if I had to pick between those two, I'd go ahead and pick this one, because this has been a ton of fun to drive. It's been really nice and comfortable. These seats have been good. I love the lighter interior. The screens have done everything I've needed them to, especially being nice and big. And really my only complaint is that I feel like I sit a little bit high up here. And that's something I've run into with something like the Ioniq 6, but it's certainly not a reason not to get a car. Let me know if you've got that one little thing that you won't buy a car because of down in the comment section below. But luckily for me, I've still got some driving to do, and it's not just popping around town. This is the trip you probably wouldn't have taken in your Nissan LEAF before, and I'm so glad that we get to take it now. And whether or not you decide that this is right for you, I think this is a great step, not just for EVs and affordable EVs, but really for the Nissan LEAF, who I don't think gets enough credit for pioneering as much as it did. And yes, thank goodness we are finally on a liquid-cooled battery that has preconditioning, and at this point, it can go ahead and offload power as well. Vehicle to load will get you about 1,500 watts available, and in this model, we even have 2 power outlets to do that. But it's finally time that the LEAF gets its spot, I think, back on a pedestal, and even if it's not the top pedestal, it's one that should be recognized, and I'm glad we get a chance to do it. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. If you have any other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, you can leave them there as well. When we get this in our hands, trust me, I'll be putting the miles on it then as well. Until next time, I'll see you down the road.